NASA, mankind is about to discover extraterrestrial life. This was stated by the spokesman of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration during one of the last hearings of the Committee for Science, Space and Technology of the United States. Are you ready for disclosure? Or are you expecting little microorganisms on a distant moon in our solar system? There are many who claim that unofficially, mankind has already made contact with aliens, and not just little microorganism floating around inside a massive alien ocean, but advanced space-faring civilizations.
June 25, 1950. That's the day the Korean War broke out when North Korea, backed by the Soviet Union and China, invaded the South. The 3-year-long war devastated the peninsula. Estimates vary, but most historians agree that several 100,000 soldiers and more than 1.5 million civilians lost their lives. 16 UN member nations, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia, came to the aid of the South, committing troops to push back the advancing enemy forces. The Korean War ended with an armistice agreement, yet we are still technically at war. As you can see behind me, Korea remains the world's only divided nation today, with the most heavily fortified border anywhere on Earth.
South Korean demonstrators have staged a rally in the capital, Seoul, to denounce the U.S. president for, quote, forcing the deployment of the controversial THAAD missile system. Thousands of protesters voiced their anger at Donald Trump for pressuring Seoul into accepting the deployment of THAAD. The rally was the largest since Washington and Seoul clinched a deal to deploy the system under the pretext of fending off North Korea's threats in 2016. China has opposed the move, saying it only destabilized the region and does little to neutralize Pyongyang's threats. The protest came ahead of a visit by South Korea's new president, Moon Jae-in, in the U.S.
Muslim worshippers running in panic after an out-of-control car plows through a crowd in England. 6 people were hurt, including 3 kids, in a field in Newcastle following celebrations for the end of Ramadan. The female driver is in police custody, and they believe the incident has no connection to terrorism, but rather she just lost control of her car. This comes a week after a man drove a van into Muslim worshippers, leaving 2 London mosques, killing 1 and injuring others. That attack declared an act of terror.
After a string of terrorist attacks, Great Britain is considering arming its frontline police officers. Unlike the US or even fellow UK territory Northern Ireland, police in England and Wales generally don't carry weapons. Less than 5% are armed. But attitudes about armed police appear to be changing. While a 2006 survey found 82% of police officers in Great Britain didn't want officers to be armed, a more recent survey of London's police force found just over half said they would carry a gun if asked. England has seen several recent terror attacks, including one in which an attacker stabbed and killed an officer guarding Parliament. Even if the police want more firearms, it would be difficult and costly to purchase and distribute the guns and train police to use them. A spokesperson for the UK's National Police Chiefs Council, which will make the final decision on if officers should have firearms, said, quote, "These are early-stage discussions, not yet at a phase of formal proposals."
There have been more protests in central London. Members of the English Defence League took to the streets to vent their anger at a spate of Islamist terror attacks. But they were met by anti-fascist groups who organised a counter-rally chanting slogans saying refugees are welcome in the country.
Another Saturday, another protest. At least that's how it seems here in London at the moment. These are 2 small but very scrappy demonstrations. Here we're standing with the English Defence League. They have come out today in response to the number of terrorist attacks that we have had here in the UK just over the past couple of months. They're saying enough is enough. We need to stop Islamic fundamentalism, cut it off at the roots. They're very angry about it. And then we can swing the camera around and see just a little bit on the other side. As I say, the police keep them very well apart, but those are the anti-fascists over there, Unite Against Fascism and other affiliated groups. And they are also incredibly scrappy. There's about 40, 50 of them at the last count, but they're very noisy, and they're saying these people, the English Defence League, have no place on the streets of Britain. They want to prevent them from marching. So every time the EDL comes out, the anti-fascists come out as well.
The rise of racism, Islamophobia and fascism in the UK.
Words can't describe how much I hate everything they stand for. They're Nazis, they're fascists, and there's no place for them in society.
We stand for our freedom. No more Sharia law in this country. I'm a patriot, not a racist. There is a difference. Just because I want Christian values doesn't make me a racist.
A Christian school in Canada is worried about its freedom of religion after being told to stop teaching Bible verses that could be deemed offensive. The local authorities say passages in the Bible that denigrate or vilify one's sexual orientation should not be studied in class. The school disagrees, however, saying the ban would violate its constitutional rights. The authorities are standing their ground, though, insisting that the potentially offensive passages should not be a part of the curriculum.
The school board used is the word offense. They said you need to get rid of all offensive texts from the Bible and stop teaching this. And when it comes to that word, it can be interpreted in any way. I could be offended by the whole Bible, hence why some people in history burned the entire book because they found the entire thing offensive. Instead of responding to censorship with more censorship, we should respond with more free speech, and we should be teaching things about inclusivity as well as things about creationism and evolution. Just bring more education instead of trying to deny the opportunity to understand these texts to the children.
You might have seen reports that the number of refugees entering the U.S. has been cut nearly in half since President Trump took office, but it's not quite that simple. The State Department reports more than 13,000 refugees entered the United States from January to March in 2017. In the last 3 months of former President Barack Obama's term, that number was over 25,000. But from January to March in 2016, refugee arrivals were only 12% higher than during the same quarter this year. The timeline distinction matters because the Obama administration increased the number of refugees it admitted shortly before handing the Oval Office over to Trump. That's not to say Trump doesn't want to curb U.S. refugee intake. He sought to cap the number of total refugees entering the states at 50,000 for the 2017 fiscal year. The State Department release also comes as the Supreme Court considers whether to hear and potentially reinstate the administration's travel ban. The ban, which temporarily bars citizens of 6 Muslim-majority countries from entering the U.S., has been blocked by a number of lower U.S. courts. The nation's highest court is expected to announce whether it will hear the case to reinstate the travel ban in the next week.
With fewer than 100 days to go before the general election in Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel has described her country using words starting with the letters from A to Z. And in her personal ABC, her B words are Bundeswehr, which means state army in German, and Butterbrot, or sandwich. M is for Made in Germany plus Muslims. Her P stands for partner of the EU and NATO, along with the German word for mushroom hunting. And S is security for Israel, but also toy railway.
Israeli fighter jets struck targets inside Syria, killing 2 people. The strikes targeted 2 tanks belonging to the Syrian government in retaliation for projectiles that landed inside the Israeli-controlled Golan Heights earlier today. The Israeli army said more than 10 projectiles landed in an open area, causing no injuries or damage. The rockets are believed to be spillover from the Syrian civil war. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded to today's crossfire, saying Israel will respond by force to every firing on its territory.
ليك حرق الدنيا حرق يا محمد ليه؟
A report in London-based Al Hayat newspaper today reveals Washington may be considering the possibility of abandoning the Israeli-Palestinian peace initiative, if the most recent meeting is any indication. This report follows a tense meeting between the U.S. and Palestinian delegations this week. The U.S. demanded an end in payments to families of Palestinian terrorists and a stop to incitement during the meeting. The demands were met with harsh resistance and a call on Israel to make a stop to all settlements construction. Palestinians have rejected Israeli claims regarding incitement, and some voiced criticism for Washington taking Israel's side on issues in the negotiations.
Experts have been speculating over who could replace ISIL leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi if his death is confirmed. It follows reports of his possible elimination by a Russian airstrike. But unlike al-Baghdadi, who had a religious background, the two main contenders to replace him have a very different history. Iyad al-Obaidi and Ayad al-Jumaili both served as security officials under Saddam Hussein. And following the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003, they both joined the Sunni insurgency, part of which later transformed into Islamic State. Well, military analyst Kamal Alam thinks a disaster could be avoided if the US-led coalition didn't destroy Iraqi institutions.
When the Arab army of Saddam was disbanded, a lot of the Baathists were disgruntled. They joined the Sunni insurgency against the US forces and also against the Iranian-backed militias. A lot of them are not ideological supporters of ISIS or radical Islam, but they feel aggrieved that they're out of the Iraqi government and that the US was very heavy-handed against the Sunni Arab tribes. Certainly the United States and the United Kingdom ignored all the advice given to them about dismantling the Iraqi state, especially the Iraqi military and security forces. It was one thing getting rid of Saddam, but to destroy the Iraqi state as systematically as it was done, it led to this disaster.
One of America's most wanted terrorists may have escaped amidst an ongoing battle between Philippines security forces and Islamic State-linked militants. The battle, now entering its second month in the city of Marawi, began as a mission to capture him, but he has not been seen firsthand on the battlefield. Isnilon Hapilon is a veteran Filipino militant said to be the leader of the Islamic State group in Southeast Asia, and he is on the United States' most wanted terror list. Marawi City, along with the entire southern region of the Philippines, has been put under martial law by the president over the presence of IS militants. Nearly 300 militants and 67 government troops have been killed in the 5 weeks of fighting.
Countries in Southeast Asia are fighting back against violent extremism. Foreign affairs representatives from the Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia met this Thursday in Manila to discuss terrorism concerns. In light of recent terrorist attacks in the region, the countries agreed to take immediate actions like sharing intelligence and continuing to deploy trilateral patrols on their borders. For future meetings, the three countries also plan to block the flow of terrorist financing, weaponry, and extremist content on social media. In the Philippines, the epicenter of the region's war on terrorism is the island of Mindanao. After more than a month of fighting, crisis management officials say up to 40% of Marawi City has been destroyed. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte, who declared martial law in the island, has apologized for the damages but promised that he would work to rebuild the city.
I would like to say to the Maranao people that I am very, very, very sorry.
In Indonesia, terrorist attacks hit Jakarta last month. A suicide bombing at a bus terminal left 5 dead and 10 wounded. Malaysia's deputy prime minister links both attacks to the killing of a Malaysian Islamic State leader. The country's most wanted terrorist, Mahmud Ahmad, is still fighting in Marawi City. In an effort to continue strategizing, the three countries will hold their next meeting this October in Indonesia.
A petition has been circulating in Canada calling on the government to terminate the country's military missions to Iraq and Syria. The petition has been launched by the Hamilton Coalition to Stop the War. It says Canadian military aircraft have violated international law by conducting airstrikes over Syria. The petition also urges Ottawa to resume diplomatic relations with Damascus and lift anti-Syria sanctions. This comes as Canadian media have voiced concern that the country's jets could be caught in a dispute between the U.S. and Russia. Moscow has warned that it will track coalition planes operating west of the Euphrates River as potential targets after the U.S. shot down a Syrian government warplane on Sunday. Canada has been part of the US-led coalition against Daesh in Iraq and Syria since 2014.
Well, Moscow says Norway's decision to extend the presence of U.S. Marines on its soil will worsen relations with neighboring Russia. Now, the Russian embassy in Oslo says the presence of U.S. troops in Norway could escalate tensions on NATO's northern flank. The embassy added that Norway's decision contradicted its policy of not deploying foreign military bases in the country in times of peace. Norway, however, denies that the arrival of U.S. Marines is an act directed against Russia. It has downplayed the significance of the deployment, emphasizing the training element. Some 330 U.S. Marines will be stationed in Norway until the end of 2018. The deployment was originally aimed to practice winter warfare, cross-country skiing, and holding joint exercises.
On Friday, ahead of Moody's arrival, the Trump administration authorized the sale of unarmed surveillance drones to India. That's according to the manufacturer, General Atomics. Last year, India showed interest in buying 22 Guardian unmanned aircraft for surveillance of Indian Ocean. The deal could be worth some $2 billion. Congressional approval is still needed, but green light from the White House marks a further deepening in defense ties. In 2008, India started to sign more weapons contracts with the U.S. rather than its traditional supplier, Russia. Calls for closer security ties with India are also rising among U.S. lawmakers, but concern remains over the export of U.S. drone technology to non-allies.
Now, clashes in the east of Ukraine have taken the lives of 2 Ukrainian soldiers just a few hours after a new ceasefire between pro-Russian fighters and government troops was to go into force. Now, Ukraine's military says that 2 other soldiers have also been wounded. A pro-Russian militia, however, claim that government forces violated that truce several times. Warring sides have agreed to stop fighting so that farmers can harvest their crops. Truce is set to last until the end of August. The fighting between government forces and pro-Russian fighters in the east has killed more than 10,000 people and displaced over 1 million others since it began back in 2014.
Now, over 100 people were killed in Pakistan Sunday morning when an overturned oil tanker exploded as people were trying to collect petrol from it. The incident took place in an area near Bahawalpur in Pakistan's Punjab province. Dozens more are said to have been injured, with many in critical condition suffering from severe burns. Unconfirmed reports say the tanker turned over because it was speeding. People rushed to gather the fuel leaking from it before it caught on fire. It's feared that the death toll could rise, and with many bodies said to have been burnt beyond recognition, it's being reported that DNA sampling will have to be used to identify them.
The squad is sent into a gas chamber, and gas is released.
Exposure to toxic chemicals is a shared experience for thousands from America's greatest generation.
If you haven't checked your mask carefully enough, you'll find out now.
More than 7 decades after World War II, hundreds of surviving veterans that participated in secret mustard gas experiments and other toxic training continue to suffer long-term health consequences, according to a congressional report. Like so many others, 90-year-old Army veteran Arla Harrell cannot definitively prove that his participation in secret experiments contributed to his health problems. His family says he's suffered skin cancer, permanent scarring, and respiratory trouble, but without concrete proof, there is little help from the VA. According to that recent congressional report, the VA has denied about 90% of benefits claims from veterans like Harrell since 2005.
We've got to correct this injustice, and it's really important that Arla Harrell hear from his government that they believe him.
But now Harrell's senator, Democrat Claire McCaskill of Missouri, is fighting to get these veterans the help they need.
This was a classified, top secret operation. How is he in a position to prove it? This was kept a secret from everyone. He doesn't have a wherewithal to prove what day he had the experiment and what location.
In Washington on Friday, Donald Trump signed into law legislation that would make it easy to terminate the Department of Veterans Affairs employees. The Veterans Affairs Reform Act was designed to hold employees of the department accountable for decision-making when it comes to the treatment of veterans. The VA provides medical care and other services to millions of veterans and is the government's second-largest department. Trump said the signing of the bill ensures that veterans will now receive world-class care.
Residents were ordered to leave this public housing high-rise in North London over mounting concerns about exposed gas pipes and combustible exterior cladding.
Where do they think we're all going?
Many of the displaced must now sleep in a cramped community center. Officials are now dealing with what has grown into a health and safety crisis. One resident I spoke with, understandably frustrated, said he still doesn't know when it will be safe for him to return back home.
We are reviewing every company at the moment involved in the building and refurbishment of Grenfell Tower.
Okay. One of those companies, New York-based Arconic, supplied a component of the cladding which they said should never be used on buildings over 32 feet high. But in a statement, Arconic said it had known the panels would be used in Grenfell Tower, but it was not its role to decide what was or was not compliant with local building regulations. Ultimately, a lack of government oversight may be to blame. While the cladding is banned in high-rises in other countries, including in the U.S., the UK has not taken similar action.
Hopes that they'll find their loved ones alive are fading fast. A massive landslide in China's Sichuan province on Saturday morning crashed down on a mountain village. 93 people are still missing in the rubble. Rescue workers pulled yet more bodies out of piles of rock and mud on Sunday. The only survivors so far reported to be a couple and their 2-month-old baby. An official microblog currently puts the death toll at 25, but that number is expected to rise. The area is prone to landslides, but the scale of Saturday's was unprecedented. It's believed to have been caused by heavy rainfall. One woman said they often sleep in other villages in case of a disaster, but they cannot afford to move to the safer capital of Mao County. Reports of the landslide were largely absent from wider Chinese media, apart from Xinhua, CCTV and party mouthpiece People's Daily.
Two massive wildfires in southern Arizona and Utah are threatening homes, properties, and lives. The so-called Brian Head Fire in Utah has already expanded to more than 40,000 acres, and it's only 8% contained. Nearly 1,000 firefighters are trying to save communities, and while some spots have cooled off enough for residents to return for a short time,
we'll all go in, get what they need for about 15 minutes. We're all going to come out together.
Others gathered at this community center.
That's where the fire started, was there.
Correct.
Are still waiting to go behind fire lines.
We got out of there last night about 1, and we could see the flames up over the top.
Sleepless nights. We have 20 years of memory on that mountain.
It's a no-go to go up there, they said, so we can't get in.
Residents are relying on burn maps to see if their property is damaged. Officials are urging people who can't get back to please be patient.
It's heart-wrenching. I get it. You know, there's cabins up there that are generations old. With the cabins we've lost, and that's heart-wrenching. It could have been much worse.
In the meantime, Arizona's governor has declared a state of emergency as crews battle the Fry Fire northeast of Tucson. That fire was sparked by a lightning strike. It's burned more than 35,000 acres and is 29% contained.
Finally tonight, a mom in distress with only her 4-year-old daughter to help her. Here's ABC's Eva Pilgrim.
911, do you need police, ambulance, or fire?
Can I get mail?
Can you get what?
Mommy need home.
A Cleveland girl being called a hero tonight, making a 911 call, saving her mother's life.
I love my mommy.
How old are you?
4.
You're 4?
Aubriana this week meeting the woman on the other end of that call.
My name's Debbie. I talked to you on the phone.
As well as the other first responders who teamed up to help. Her mom, unresponsive after a seizure. The only other person home, her infant brother.
Can you tell me the numbers that are on your house?
Aubriana knew to call 911, but she didn't know her address. Dispatchers found her by tracking the cell phone.
The longer we keep somebody on the phone, the more precise the address is.
So how did a 4-year-old know to call 911?
Because mommy showed me.
Her mom taught her the password on her phone and how to use the emergency feature, just in case they ever needed it.
Wow. I can't believe she did that. I was so shocked.
Eva Pilgrim, ABC News, New York.